Shrine name saved for the few.
The game is yours to play now.
The light provides.
This is Eventide Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Eventide Radio. This is a fan-made Destiny podcast where we have roundtable discussions about a variety of different topics concerning the popular video game franchise. At its core, the show is about having in-depth discussions about the game from a variety of different perspectives. I'm your host Scotty, with me are my co-hosts Rob and Mapador, and today we have a lot to talk about. We haven't been on the mic in a couple weeks or so, and Heresy just dropped, so there is a lot of stuff to talk about. There's a new seasonal activity, there's new story, there's new updates to, all sorts of parts of the games, like ritual activities and stuff. There's a new exotic mission, there's a new dungeon. There's so much stuff in Destiny right now. So this is a great time to talk about it. But before we get into it, as always, especially since it's been kind of a hot minute since we've talked, Rob, what have you been up to this week in Destiny?
Everything and anything. It's a brand new season episode, whatever. It's a season. I'm just gonna call it. I'll never adapt to the episode because this is the last one of its kind anyway. So regardless, I have been enjoying it quite a bit, playing a lot, running some Nether, which we'll dive into a lot more. Just kind of been enjoying some of the overall changes. I think I feel like the changes that they made in the previous season for what was the previest season? Damn it. Revenant, thank you.
He's already forgotten it.
Yeah, I know. I've already forgotten it. Have maybe sort of over-tuned some things, and I feel like they've kind of throttled back, and I feel like they're kind of reaching a good middle ground, which we'll, I guess, dive into a little bit more. So I've been enjoying it. There's a lot of stuff, right? Farming VOG weapons, new dungeon, new activity that I think has a lot of replayability, changes to trials and PvP in general. So just kind of been drinking from the fire hose.
Nice. That feels good. Yes. I assume, right? To actually be playing a bunch of new stuff. It's always a good feeling. And
I played Revenant pretty extensively as well. I got the Slayer Baron title, and I did the exotic mission at the end, and so I never really stopped playing. But this is kind of another one of those scenarios where I always feel like when a season, it's always the last season before an expansion comes out is always the best. That's everyone's opinion, and so far this is kind of shaping up to be true.
Yep.
And unfortunately, a bunch of people in my clan, I guess fortunately and unfortunately, a bunch of people have come back to start playing, but they do this thing where they haven't played in such a long time, then they just play the ever-living hell out of it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they just completely peter off after that, and they disappear again until the expansion comes out. And I try to do more of a slow burn, because I want to accomplish all of the things, and when the new chapters come out, I intend on playing those and all of that stuff. And so it's it's fun for that first couple weeks, and then my whole fire team just sort of disappears again for months. So right now it's good, but that's always what happens.
Yeah, no, I totally get that.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. Matt, what have you been up to this week?
So I haven't really played Destiny that much until Heresy dropped. I didn't really play much of... I did the story stuff, but I didn't really play much of Revenant. I was going to say, Rob, you reminded me, I haven't done a seasonal title, I think, since Season of the Wish.
That's fair.
I had them all. I made sure I'd get every single one each season because it goes away.
Right.
And then I was busy because of work and couldn't finish it. And I was like, that's it. I'm never doing a seasonal title again. I've missed one. I'll miss them all. And I kind of just went on strike for them. But I've done the story stuff this week. Obviously, I've done some Nether. I did some with you, Rob, but I did some more on my own.
Well, that's right. Yeah, we did run another last week.
I've done a bit of comp. I avoided quick play and comp at the start because of Radiant Dance Machines.
Oh, yeah.
And Last Word, so that's gone which is nice. However, there is something new we have to sort of worry about, but it's kind of under the radar a little bit. Only slightly, though. But I did some trials. The new trials really work, which was nice, and we can talk about that shortly.
Yes.
But I'd also forgotten that they changed the VOG weapons, so I wouldn't actually mind running some VOG.
Yeah.
I mean, I would mind running VOG, but, you know, sorry. I had to get that one in there. But no, I'll run some VOG at some point to get some of the weapons.
What they do to the VOG weapons?
They changed the perks and they made them craftable.
Yeah.
Oh shit!
Yes.
Yeah,
that's cool.
See, I forgot about that. But I'm liking the season so far, which is good.
Me too.
It's giving me some optimism.
As for what I've been up to, I've been playing the dungeon quite a bit. Anytime a new dungeon comes out, I'm always very excited. Because me and my buddies love new dungeons. I've played it 3 times so far. I think it's really good. We'll touch on it in a little bit, but that's where most of my time's been spent on Destiny lately. But also just getting caught up on the new stuff, exploring the Nether, just doing all the new stuff that's dropped. I haven't really touched trials or anything like you guys have, but it's been good. So
it's probably the best weekend to play trials.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
next weekend. So I would suggest
okay.
doing a run either this weekend or next weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to try it out. So let's start off by talking about the new stuff. So Heresy came out. When did Heresy come out? It wasn't last week, was it?
No, it's been 2 weeks now.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Should we
been
do
out for a little
story?
while. They're doing one thing that I noticed. They didn't drop the entire story like they did with Revenant.
Thank God.
Yeah, I think that was the right move.
Bad decision.
Yeah,
it felt so demoralizing to be like, right, well, the next 3 steps of the quest are do the exotic mission over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do all 3 of them in the same day so I don't get spoiled by some twat on Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, YouTube recommendations, that sort of shite.
Yeah, so it is kind of nice, honestly. And I'm normally not like a huge fan of like drip feeding story content, but when it's like this, and like you said, like I don't want to be spoiled, and I don't. I mean, that means I have to grind through the entire thing immediately because I don't want to
been spoiled by some idiot posting leaked dialogue audio on my YouTube recommendation that I had no, I couldn't have avoided that unless I signed out of YouTube, which I'm not going to do. But I actually think they got their video taken down because I think I saw them complaining about it on some other social media site, which is good. I'm glad Bungie are going after things like that because it just completely ruined. It's like a big story thing, which I won't say, but yeah, and it's like, that would have been nice to see come about naturally rather than, But what do you guys think of the story so far?
You go first, Scotty.
I'm interested by it. Not a whole lot. Oh, okay. Actually, I take that back. a lot did happen. Eris Morn gets stabbed by a subjugator in the very beginning. And I'm kind of torn on it because at first I was like, oh shit, they actually did kill Eris Morn, but about 5 seconds later you find out she is in what I presume to be her throne world or whatever, and she's not actually dead.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? That's totally fine. I feel like I would have been upset, honestly, ultimately, if Eris Morn did die to just some random subjugator guy, would kind of suck. But you find out she's alive, like, pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of, like, the dialogue that happens after that mission, you're talking to people, and you're talking to Sloane and Drifter and Ikora and stuff, and they're like, oh man, it sucks that Eris is dead. We have to like remember her and mourn her and stuff, and you're like paying respects to her, and it's like, guys, did any of you watch the cutscene? She's alive. So it's just kind of like,
I think the only reason they put that cutscene there is because of leakers.
You think so?
I genuinely think that's the only reason why they did that.
It just felt strange because it just takes you out of it, and you're like, all right.
Can you imagine if you found out through a leak that she was still alive?
That's true. I mean, I would rather find out through the game for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed the moment she got killed that was going to be the punchline. Like, she's not really gone.
Yeah.
But
it was also the fact he took her body as well. Like,
yeah,
true.
There was that,
which was badass. By the way, like he stabs her and then just drags her body off the platform.
He filled it with stasis.
Yeah.
I really like this scene where Drifter is holding Eris's
the performances are really good.
Yeah.
Calling her like Moonlight instead of Moon Dust. I'm like, oh my god. So that was really sweet.
His no was very convincing.
100%. One other critique though is that, so if you guys read the lore for like the Sundered Doctrine armor, I don't know if you guys care if I quote unquote spoil that.
You can spoil that.
That's fine.
So that subjugator, I mean, you could probably infer this by
I think I've heard
his
this
subtitle. He's like the first of the reshaped. He's like the first subjugator, first dread, or something like that.
Yeah.
I wish there was some sort of like visual indicator in his design.
I think his head is slightly different.
I wish there was something more than that then, because like he kind of looks. He's the
subjugator from the Final Shape teaser. That's him.
Yeah.
That's him. It's John Subjugator.
John Subjugator kills Arismorn. I wish he was like a little bit. I wish there was something more to him that made him more significant as like
more like
subjugator.
Like kind of like with Keitel where they gave her like the feathers or something like that. Yeah, just
something. I mean, even Keitel's is like, I think like way unique, like super unique. But
sure.
That would be awesome. But like even just something small, like I don't know, change the color of his stasis crystals to like something would be.
Well, now he's got a trust shot hole in his face, so there's that.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
The point blank trust shot was sick.
That was probably her first mistake, was using trust in any kind of activity. Like that's
hey, no.
Trust in 2025 is crazy.
Drifter used that sunset in Beyond Light, and that worked fine. He was one tapping all the fallen with it. So
it's because that's the first mission, right? Like light level didn't really come into play yet, so that's why it was okay in that first area.
But it was sunset. It was gone.
Speaking of trust, though, I am dying to get if we can ever get an animator on this show to talk about some little cutscenes animations. I loved Eris's little revolver spin in that one shot, with like cool. that like orbiting shot, and then Eris and Drifter are like back to back, and she does the little like revolver spin with trust. I'm like, oh, that's so sick. So I would love to get someone to talk about that and just like the thought process of like, oh, like how do we stage fight scenes and stuff like that.
I was going to say I don't think we'll have any high end CGI cutscenes anymore. So we'll probably have just the in-game ones.
Yeah.
Well, no, because we got the one in Revenant.
The one in Revenant was pretty good.
It was probably no. I mean the ones that were like the Final Shape cutscenes or those. Because the company who makes them doesn't exist anymore. So
that's right.
Those two, I think, were made either by Bungie or someone else. Like the one that plays at the start of the first episode as well with Saint and Osiris. It's the same style as it's the same style as the one in Revenant as well, which is a cool cutscene.
Yeah.
Adding on to story stuff, as far as like what works, what doesn't. I think a good chunk of like the story stuff that I'm like super interested in right now comes from the dungeon, to be honest with you. A lot of the lore in the dungeon is actually really cool, and kind of the implications of what is happening there is really neat, and I'm very intrigued to see where that goes. You don't normally see with dungeons. I think they've been doing a really good job of making these dungeons like actually have some sort of like story implication, or at least just being like this supplemental material.
They sort of start like, I mean, they've always sort of been that, but I think like the first sort of inkling of that major story stuff was with Prophecy.
I agree. Yeah, that was like the first time they tried to make it like connected to the rest of the narrative, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll never remember the first one, the Ascendant.
Shattered Throne.
I mean, Shattered Throne has tie into the story, and I think
actually,
contextually with
even more so, actually,
with Forsaken, that it works. And it's unfortunate that the first dungeon was like you can only play it once every 3 weeks or whatever, because it was like tied in with the And like I from like a story perspective, I totally get it. From a like, hey, I want to do this dungeon whenever I feel like it. That was a terrible decision, and I'm glad that they fixed that eventually. Like, I feel like
it was cool at first. Yeah, it was very cool at first.
Yeah. I feel like all of the dungeons have had some level of decent involvement. Maybe Spire of the Watcher's a little bit of a like, probably maybe the weakest. But I think a lot of them, like Pit of Heresy, even like, I'm not a fan of that dungeon, but it still has like a relevant. Oh, and Duality. I don't know. I just don't like Duality for a few different reasons. But
that's fair. Understandable.
I agree with you that I think a lot of they've done a good job with the dungeons really feeling like they have a purpose in the bigger, because they're here to stay, like the raids, and I almost feel like the dungeons are more story heavy than the raids are. Where it's like the raids, you just feel like, okay, you're confronting like the big baddie from that season or from that expansion, but the raids feel like the dungeons feel like they've got more like intent and love behind them. You know what? I take that back. I know this is going to make Scotty happy. I feel like Grasp of Avarice is also kind of like, there's not much there.
Terrible. Yeah.
No, it's not terrible, but it's, I mean, really, in the big scheme of things, like moving the story along, it's probably the weakest. Because it's its own little
because
it's the 30th anniversary thing. Like kind of just nod and like, but in terms of actually moving the story, it's probably the weakest.
I love that Sundered Doctrine's like talking about the origin of the dread and then like characterizing them and how they feel and like what their goals are going forward is like something I've been really wanting since Final Shape. So this is like answering some of my burning questions and filling holes that I have had since then. So it's
and we got it within,
really filling a good spot.
And we got it within the year that they were introduced, as opposed to like there's a lot of things where it feels like it feels like there wasn't like a revelation on them for like years potentially, and you know, like I feel like it's good that here's a new character or a new enemy race that was introduced, and by the way, we'll actually give you enough information early enough on that you get some kind of motivation behind them. So
yeah, exactly. As far as the main seasonal story, there's not like a ton I can comment on besides that opening, but I'm definitely interested to see like where the mystery is headed.
Right.
And I love that Savathun is involved and has actual dialogue and actually like shows up and everything. Like the scene where you go to her throne world and she shows up and she's like, stay out of this family thing. And
so in regards to the story, I don't disagree with you. I have been having trouble actually following past that cutscene, and I feel like we can kind of dive into this a little bit more. That's fair. With the opening, right? They announced that there was going to be dialogue missing due to the writer's strike, and
was that what it was for?
I thought so.
No, it's the voice actor strike.
Oh, voice actors, not writer strike. Voice actor.
Yeah,
it's a strike, and that's it. So
it's against AI using people's voices. So people who are getting annoyed about the no dialogue, suck it up and support voice actors.
Yeah, I did not know the reason. That. I think it's fine. It's just, it's unfortunate that, like, I'm all for strikes and unions, and like, I think it's good that they're doing that, and this feels like the Bungie did kind of the responsible thing by just not having their dialogue be replaced by AI. Like, that's good and fine. It's just really unfortunate because the way the dialogue is like delivered instead, where you like go, like, because they also tried to do this new thing where it's like you don't go to the tower constantly to like watch a hologram projection to advance the season, right? Like, so what they did instead is like you go to orbit and you get dialogue that kind of fills in the blanks and stuff. The unfortunate thing is I never know who's talking, and most of the time when I go into orbit, I'm looking at like menu stuff, and so like the captions sort of are hard to read in your menu, and it doesn't do a great job of like telling you who's saying what. Like, I think like usually right at the beginning it'll have like a little box indicating like who's saying it, but then it's like you're not sure if there's a conversation going on or if it's just one person talking at you, and like it's really unfortunate that they tried this new delivery system, which I appreciate that they did in conjunction with the strike, so that it's like, I almost wish that we had the hologram thing, because you'd have a picture of who's talking to you, and you get that little summary at the end, so you can just read it instead. Like, they cannot catch a break with the stars aligning right now, and it's really unfortunate. Like, I'm glad that I'm not glad that there's a strike, but I'm glad that they're doing the responsible thing in regards to the strike. It just does not work well, and I have no idea from like a story perspective like what's going on entirely. Like, with this past week, I don't know what the story was of like why I went back into the Nether. And I also have a bug that apparently not everyone has, where some audio is supposed to play when you're in orbit, but not all of it. But I don't get any audio playing when I go into orbit. So
I have heard the dialogue on
I haven't heard any dialogue when I'm in orbit. So I don't know what's going on.
Neither have I. And
this goes back into this season is not nearly as buggy as last season, but holy shit, like it is just the perfect storm of like bad things to happen, and it's pretty rough. Like I know with like they also said they were trying new things like oh, you'll get like a hologram projection like partway through a story mission, and they kind of did that with this week, where you have to descend down into Savathun's like little temple in that like the chasm, the lava chasm area, which is still one of the coolest designed areas. I wish there was more that we did there, or that they made like a PvP map in that area, because it's a cool design. But like when you go, like the drifter kind of pops out of your ghost or whatever and starts talking to you, and then Savathun shows up. So like I think from like a story beat perspective, like I'm glad I'm not going to a hologram projector and getting stuff, but I almost wish this season, because we don't have voice actors, that we did. And I hate saying that. Like, it just, like, they should have, and I know, like, they probably got to a certain point where they realized the strike was going on. Well, we've already committed to this design in the season because there's a lag time and design and yada yada. Like, I'm not trying to backseat dev or whatever the term is, the gamer chair dev. Like, I'm not trying to do that, but like, because I am sympathetic to that. All of these things take egregious amounts of time, and who knows how far back they had set all this stuff up, and like you can tell some of the dialogue's been recorded already and things like that. But man, this was not the season to move away from the hologram thing if you don't have voice acting. Like, it's really unfortunate.
Very sure.
And I would say that's like the kind of the outstanding thing where I think it's really a detriment to the season in terms of like story delivery. And I know it's for a good cause, but it's just like, God, this sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be sympathetic, and it's like, it could not have been a worse set of circumstances to kind of have everything set up or work out this way.
If it's any condolence to you, I feel like most of the dialogue that you might be missing, like in orbit, is just kind of slow and just saying like, we gotta go find out what's happening. And
there is drifter dialogue. Maybe you just happen to not get the drifter one.
In orbit, there's supposed to be drifter dialogue?
See, exactly.
Yeah, I get drifter dialogue.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's like I don't know who's talking. I just see words come up.
But you know what? It might actually be depending on where you are in the quest, because
Sure.
I haven't finished the quest, so I get the same drifter dialogue over and over and over again. So
You're taking
maybe
your first steps into a very deep well.
no. So
Yeah,
maybe
It's like the same one you get all the time.
no. It's him about Savathun and power in the Dreadnought and Throne World and But I think maybe depending on where you are in the quest, you get different dialogue. So maybe the step I'm at, because I haven't done any more, is drifter dialogue. But the steps that you've always happened to be at, where you've had the dialogue play, are where Salone is.
That could be it. It's just
Yeah.
crummy if that's the case, because it's
Yeah.
because that's like I'm at the step right now where it's like wait until next
I've
week.
only had drifter dialogue. Like I've
Got it.
only had drifter. So, but I kind of got to that step and then haven't done any more. So that could be why. Whereas you've obviously done it. So that could be why.
So, slight gear shift.
Yep.
Let's talk about the new activity, the Nether.
Yes.
Never.
It is a. I'll just spoil right now. I am like super excited about this activity.
Yes.
It is like their proper, real like roguelike activity.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like the thing that they were saying Contest of Elders was going to be, but it absolutely was not.
Not
I
even
hope
close.
they add a roguelike game mode into Destiny that stays. Is a permanent. It's not seasonal. It's just, it's there. It's part of the game.
Well,
that.
I hope this sticks around. I have a feeling that it won't. But
Well, no, it's going to go in the bin, isn't it?
I know. Same with Contest of Elders. Like I like this has been kind of the season of like, what have we got in the back catalog that people have been asking for? Like, well, more Vex, like Maya Sunderesh stuff. Well, we check that box off. Oh, people want Prison of Elders in some way. Well, let's do Contest of Elders. Oh, people want the Dreadnought back. Well, let's do that. And it's unfortunate because like I wanted them to have a little more staying power than like this short season that they're in. And I kind of get the feeling that it's not going to be. And it's really unfortunate because I think more than anything, the aesthetic changes that they've made to the Dreadnought, where it literally feels like the flesh is being pulled off and revealing like the bone underneath, is such a cool...
Oh, and the weapons as well.
The weapons are exquisite.
Very good.
And I could not be more ecstatic with like... They brought the Dreadnought back, and it feels like the Dreadnought. Like every location that you're at, you know where you're at with respect to like the OG Dreadnought, and that's cool. Like they didn't ruin it by like, and as you pointed out, Map, that I didn't even kind of put two and two together, is the Cabal that are there are explicitly like not the Sand Eaters. What are
the Dust Giants?
The Dust Giants, like they're the ones that should be there, and they look like the Dust Giants from D1.
Give us the Primus, or we blow the shit.
Yeah, and they didn't just inject like some like
Red Legion
sprites in there. Like they're actual legit they look like the ones from D1, and like it feels like the Dreadnought, and it feels like what maybe should have happened to it over the last 10 years. It's been maybe like degrading and decrepifying into and changing into whatever this like hideous changes and sort of reflects that, and I think it's wonderful, and yeah, it's more than anything, and I'm glad that they did this. It's fun to just kind of walk around and explore.
Totally.
And it sounds like they're doing some kind of Court of Oryx activity in part 2 based on some of the triumphs that you can kind of see. So it's like, yeah, if they do something where you go back, like I was one of those people that I like to just hang out in Court of Oryx and like help people get things done, right? Because you needed those like tributes.
Yeah.
And so like people wanted to just like stack up, and it was like it was a good way to get decent rewards at the time during like the Taken King era. So it's like I went back even other times that I've gone back and played D1, like long after D1 was sort of sunset, like I'll just hang out in the Court of Oryx and help random blueberries who clearly have no idea what they're doing. And like it's such a cool like activity and location that they brought it back in the right way, but I'm sad because it's probably not going to stick around, and that bums me out.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, especially considering this is the last episode in this
Right.
lifespan thing, so it's
Right.
gonna have the shortest lifespan out of everything.
I know.
Which
know.
is such a bummer.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it would have been different if it was like the first episode instead, where it sticks around for a whole year.
Right.
But if it's just gonna be a couple months, it kind of sucks.
And
Mm.
the whatever this Contest of Elders, or whatever the hell it was called last season, I was not as like, it felt like Prison of Elders ish, but it wasn't like you went to familiar locations. Like you kind of went into like kind of the back alley areas of them, or they're so far like warped from what they used to look like that they don't really resemble their D1 counterparts. So like if that goes away, I'm okay with it, especially since they kind of didn't do a great job of recreating Prison of Elders that I was naively hoping that they would. Whereas this,
I mean, it's going to go away, isn't it? It's just not
it is,
seasonal.
and I'm not broken up about that, but I am pretty bummed out if this goes away, because this is such a cool space to hang out in.
Yeah, right. I agree. The activities, I think, really cool.
Yes.
And the amount of secrets and little things you can find is just crazy. There's so many different currencies to find, and there's different events that
I
happen.
like the taken worms.
Yeah.
There's stuff all over the place. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I spent an hour and a half in the first time I did it. I'm like, that was the longest seasonal activity I've ever played.
Right.
And there's just so much little nooks and crannies to explore, and different secrets to uncover, and it's super fun. It's super cool, and I love that health is a currency, like they said. Which is really, really cool.
That's very cool.
It feels like there are stakes involved, especially if you're playing solo. I think it's even cooler. I also kind of love that there's no music for most of it. I think that's a cool just atmospheric thing. I think there are so many different encounters that it feels very varied and interesting, and you could kind of play them in the order you want to play them in,
Right.
kind of. It feels different enough every time that it's interesting. It just all around it feels good. The boons you pick up feel meaningful.
The stasis slide or the
exactly.
they're all very good.
Never pick up fragile strength though. Oh my god,
I don't even know what that one is.
The kiss curse ones are a little too.
The curse ones are a little
the negative. The
brutal.
negative seem too much
yeah. I've fragile strength is for context map. It's you do more damage to enemies, but you take more damage in return.
Oh yeah,
Classic
I've seen that one. I've just
kind of thing.
The damage you take is kind of brutal. It feels and the bosses are cool. It's just all around. It's just I feel it feels very good. It's pretty rewarding too. There's chests all over the place. You get rolls. There's the gold border ones, which have double perk columns.
Oh yeah, I've had about 3 or 4 of those, and I've only done 4 runs of the actual game mode. I haven't.
Feels like a good trade-off to them
I've
not
done
being
4
craftable.
Yeah.
Just all of it feels good, but
so the prospect when they first kind of announced the health being a currency. So for context, I play some roguelites, I play FTL, I play Slay the Spire. Those are kind of the 2 big ones that I've dabbled with. I've played a little bit of Hades and things like that too, but those are kind of the two big ones. And they, especially in Slay the Spire, they do a really good job of making health actually feel like a currency, where there are encounters where you can give up half of your max life, but then you get cards that explicitly heal you all the time and things like that, where that actually feels like a currency. And at the beginning of the season, I would have agreed more with that sentiment, but kind of in typical Bungie fashion, I really am kind of disappointed by this. They sort of on day one, they're certain weapons are not giving, or certain health rewards are not working the way they're supposed to, and like things like Unrelenting and the Arc Titan melee were giving back like all of the health, and they weren't supposed to.
Yeah,
And so
I did notice that.
And so so this last Tuesday, what day is that? The 11th. They already came out with a patch to like fix these things, or was it the 11th or 13th? Maybe it was on Thursday. But regardless, I feel like they overtuned it, and now everything just feels like your health comes back too easily. And I kind of liked it the way it was before, because it actually did feel like you had to play with your health in mind, and that, to your point, Scotty, where it's like you could attack whatever encounter you wanted to in whatever order, right? When you first load into an area, you can kind of survey and go, oh, the twins that shield each other are hanging out over here. Like, let me go take out those guys first, because I have my super ready and I can probably nuke them pretty quickly, you know? And like, and when health was more critical, you actually had to take into consideration like, oh, well, I need more health pots. I need to go find them somewhere. I can't really do this activity right now, like the one where you have to like escort the giant like firestone all the way from one thing to another, and the whole time you're just getting attacked by bats. Like I'm not going to touch that until I know I've got enough health to kind of sustain that, right? So it's like, before, I feel like it was actually played a factor and it felt slightly more challenging, but now it's like, I did an expert the other day after the changes, and it was like I had my health all the way up the entire time, and I only died at the very end to the giant taken meatball with the stupid like void spikes everywhere. And it's like, so I feel like they keep doing this where it's like they don't even give it time to like cook, where it's like it comes out and immediately a bunch of people who are probably not going to play past the first week anyway because they're losers. I'm just going to say it because there's a bunch of people that do that, right? They come out with like a new expansion comes out, they play it, they complain about it a bunch, and then they just they bitch out like right at the beginning. And it's like, you didn't give it a fair chance. You didn't let them really see where they were taking it. And so like Bungie's already kind of like gone back on it and fixed a bunch of things. Like, yeah, they probably should have fixed Unrelenting and the Titan thing, but I kind of liked how it was before, where it's like Devour didn't immediately give you all your health back, and like health orbs or orbs of power didn't immediately replenish everything. Like, yeah, they gave you little chunks of health and you could feel it, but like I feel like they should have stood their ground a little bit more and go, no, we really think this is what's healthy for this gameplay mode. Because there was a couple times where I ran a Nether and it was like, oh, we only have one health revive left. We need to play smarter because we still have to defeat the boss, right? And it's like, that actually felt like a little bit more of like we could fail this activity, which there's not enough of those anymore. Like, all you have really are Grandmaster Nightfalls. That's the only thing that you can like fail and actually have to go back to orbit and do over from the beginning. And they need to do more stuff like that. And so I liked the idea of like, oh, you've got this like really simple where you have the explorer mode where nothing really hits you that hard. You've got a lot more revive tokens. You're encouraged to go explore the Dreadnought. Great. But if you're gonna throw as many rewards at me as they have, it needs to be in a more difficult context. And I think with the major boons and the minor boons, like especially when you start getting some of those going, where it's like there was one where all the stars aligned, and I think I got like 10 of the grenade recharge, like minor boons by the end I was there, and it was like I felt like I could just chuck nades to my heart's content, and it was awesome because it like felt like I kind of felt that return. I would say maybe my only request or hope was that the minor boons were also like you could choose, rather than just like seemingly like you break a health potion and oh, now there's like a minor boon. And of course I'm going to pick it up, but it would be cool if you could like re-roll for it, because like maybe you're trying to get all the way on.
Give an extra choice.
Yeah,
there.
Exactly, where it's like, don't just give me this, like let me go, oh no, I want to stack all of the boss resistance ones I want, or all the class resistance ones I want, because I picked up the major boon that gives me health every time I activate my class ability, and now I've got this omega fast class ability recharge. Well, now I'm just a healing monster. Like that, I think that's like the last little link, I think, to really making it feel like a true roguelite, where you're every time you play, you're building into a specific theme of like, I'm doing all grenades, and I want as much damage as I can against bosses. So those are the two things I'm going to be looking for. Now, maybe I have to pick up a slide stasis because that's the only thing I have available. But Like, give me a little more power of choice, and then I think you have like the perfect. And this is where I think the coil did it a little bit better, where every time you finished a round, there was a lot more to choose from, and I think it gave a little bit more into the idea of like doing a quote unquote build for that run that kind of played to your strengths. And there was a couple of times in Coil where I'd get to that first reward screen and it's like, oh, it's all solar and I'm running a void subclass. Looks like I'm swapping over to solar. And I feel like I haven't been forced to really do that in the Nether, where it's like I just go in running whatever build I start with and I can just kind of finish it through, because there's nothing that really, there's no min-maxing that kind of forces me to go one direction or the other. So I think like if you close that gap, then I feel like you have a good formula that you can kind of expand upon, where it's like, make me be a little more deciding with like what I go for. Because right now it's just I pick up every minor boon, and before I know it, I've got moderately good class ability, moderately good grenade recharge, moderately good melee. Oh, and I can do this slide thing, but I didn't really feel like thematically I chose anything. So
yeah, I agree, because you can't choose any of the minor boons.
Right.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's like the one thing I would change about it. But otherwise, it is a cool. It's so neat. I just, all the exploration, and I'm still finding new secrets. Like every time I go through, I'm like, okay, I found everything in this area. Like I know it like the back of my hand. It's like, oh, now there's a new altar that I can summon these fires and a boss will spawn. I had never noticed that before, either because I wasn't paying attention or the previous run that I did, it wasn't there. And so it's like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, it's full of secrets, and it does a good job of every time you run through it, like it feels like you're kind of something new to find, and that's awesome.
My other critique would be just, it does feel, if you're playing it, like if you're playing the 3-person like arena mode and you're playing it like as like part of a quest line where it's like go into the Nether, go do stuff in the Nether, it does feel it's a little slow and it's a little long as opposed to some other seasonal activities. If I had a nitpick, and play devil's advocate, but no, I really like it too.
Yeah,
Map, how are you feeling about it?
I like it. I do wish those seasonal activities weren't as long. Yes. I get why they need to be, but I do find it's like, I'll do a run of Nether. Okay, that's going to probably be half hour, 40-minute run, depending on what people are doing.
Right.
Like, I like the exploring aspect of it. Obviously, I want to find all the collectibles. But if I just want to get in and get out, I don't want to waste my time, but I also don't want to waste someone else's time who does want to get the collectible stuff. And like, all right, yes, you can go in with a pre-made team to do that and blitz it. But I play the seasonal activities less since they've got longer.
Yeah.
Because they went from being like strike length, sometimes even shorter than that, to now being longer. Like I could get 3 strikes done in that time.
Right.
All right. Depending on the strike. I know they have made strikes longer now, and they've changed the short ones, but I feel like there should be 2 things in a season where you get one longer game mode, one shorter one. Like I know it's a roguelike, so you typically can't have it be that short. Specifically, this is just a general, I say, critique of the seasonal activities, that they are getting longer.
Yeah.
Or they feel like they are. But I like the roguelike part in it. I'd like there to be a permanent version of that.
Yeah.
More fleshed out, maybe. You know, where you eventually get some really crazy ones. The further you go in, it gets really difficult.
Yeah.
But like a permanent stay in Destiny, like how Onslaught is. Its own game mode. But I think it's good. Obviously, the setting helps. I think if it was in a different place, people wouldn't like it as much. But, I mean, that's going to be like anything.
Yeah.
But it's in a familiar place that's got some new secrets to it, which is very cool. The enemy density is fine. The puzzles in it, if you want to call them puzzles, are fine. They're not like... They're quick to do. They're not difficult. You know, you're not going to get matched with randoms and think, oh my God, what is going on?
Right.
And it take too long. So that's nice. It's very rewarding. I've got a lot of stuff. I've had 4 of the curated rolls of the guns, which is cool. The gear for this season is pretty nice as well. It's nice. It's just nice being back in the Dreadnought.
Yep.
I think after a while, I like some parts of Savathun's Throne World, but I prefer the Dreadnought hive design sort of thing. I prefer it when it's weird and cavey and but like cavey in the sense of it's hive architecture in a cave, not a cave near hive architecture, if that makes sense. Like the Moon or the Throne World where there's that cave system.
Yeah.
So that's nice. I always feel Bungie nail the hive stuff. I feel like they've got that on like lockdown when it comes to their presentation. I feel like maybe the reason those seasons, like, the better the expansion with the characters that they're using, the future content's better. Like, we haven't had a Vex DLC, and we haven't had a good Fallen DLC. So I feel like when we get seasonal content around them, it just kind of falls flat because we haven't had this whole thing of, I don't know, I think I've just sort of realized this. I think because it's less fleshed out, like, when you have an expansion, you flesh out these races and you sit there and you have like a new tile set or new stuff to do with them. Whereas the last time we had Fallen stuff, it was Beyond Light, which, is Beyond Light. And then Vex haven't really had their own. They just kind of slapped on to all the other ones. So when it comes to making seasonal content for them, it always kind of falls flat a little bit. But with the Cabal and the Hive, it tends to do better.
Yeah.
Fair.
And maybe that's an aspect of it. But I think it's good. I probably won't play it as much as you guys, but I think it's good.
Yeah, I'm liking it too. And I agree. It's kind of like it's a little long.
Yeah,
which would be my only.
I think I wouldn't have minded. I think my job. I'm busier than I was when I was working before, so I think there's that aspect. But that's like going to be most people. Like,
sure.
I feel less inclined to play that
just because it is. Yeah, I get that.
Because I'm like, I like doing bits of work in between stuff. So I'll go into a PvP match or two. I'll do a bit of work. I'll come back,
Yep.
Whereas if I'm doing the Nether, it's like, oh, that's like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think they kind of, you brought this up too, Map, with like Onslaught. And there's kind of an interesting... And then we had this with like the Coil, where there's like the short version where it's like basically one round. And I'm actually surprised they didn't do that with the Nether, that there's not like you just load into one of the 4 areas.
Do you think it's because of the Court of Oryx thing that they're not doing that?
Yeah, it could be. Like they're kind of waiting for that to be that activity. Yeah. I will say there's so many different groups of people and like what you're trying to do, and you can't please everybody, but it's like, Onslaught, there's kind of this general consensus that like 10 waves is kind of short, but 50 is kind of long. And again, it's another thing where you're committing to at least an hour to do a 50 wave. And really, it'd be nice if there was like a 30 wave version. And I think with like Nether, if there was like maybe a 1 or 2 room version versus like committing to doing a 3 room, that might go over better, but then you really aren't fleshing out the raid or the roguelite part of it, where it's not, you're not really actualizing all the different kind of buffs and boons and all that things that you get from it. But I think,
sure.
Yeah, but we've seen this with other iterations of it too, where it's like, something that they dabbled with Season of the Witch that I kind of liked, but I think it was maybe the wrong context, was there was that one activity where you basically load in and you just stay there indefinitely, as long as you have those boons or whatever they were called. The boons is used for like everything in this game. Like it loses its what it means. It's like the number of times they use like pinnacle to describe different things. Right? We've had pinnacle weapons and we have pinnacle rewards. Right? It's like, stop calling things boons. Like stop. But like that was
They're
kind of
also
a cool
ball shaped. Just
I know.
Side note.
Yeah. Where it's like, that was a cool idea where it was like an endless mode, but people didn't really like that much. But I think that's more because it was not very rewarding. Whereas, like, I would be intrigued by, and I think people have kind of talked about this, and I would be curious to see how many people would actually do it, is if they did like an endless mode for Onslaught, where like you keep going past 50 waves. Now there's probably some limitation to like memory and other things, but it would be really cool to see how high people could actually push the difficulty on Onslaught, where eventually you're playing the same bosses over and over again, but it gets escalatingly more and more difficult, but the rewards are getting more and more worth it, and eventually get to the point where you literally have like every trap and every turret is like maxed out because you're just going to those 3 locations over and over again on the map. Like I want to see like a truly endless mode, and I think Nether you could do something like that too, right? Where it's like you clear out those 3, but then you keep going and you go to the 4th room and then you repeat back to the first one, and like you keep getting more and more of the boons and maxing everything out and seeing how like crazy powerful you can get against harder and harder kind of difficulty. Like I think there needs to be shorter things, but there also should be more longer things for people that want to commit to more than like an hour and push their builds to see how far they can go. Because right now, like, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, like it's, as it stands, you get to that 3rd wave and it's still pretty easy. And I want to see more things where it's like, oh, it's a high risk, high reward, where it's like, oh, you're pushing harder and harder content. But if you run out of revive tokens, you're out, and then you have to start over again. And I really wish that they would do more stuff like that, where it's like, you can always play the very like simple 10 wave mode or 1 round mode and get rewards, and you're still gonna have a good time. You're not committing to a whole lot, like you said, Map. Like you're playing it as effectively a strike or PvP match, but like have there be something for the higher end that actually really pushes builds in interesting ways. And again, it could be a limitation due to like memory and hardware and software, and maybe Nether barely holds on the way it does. I don't know, but like I would love to see kind of more on both directions, more like shorter game modes and like endless type things as well.
Mm-hmm. It would be kind of cool to have a proper endless mode.
Yeah, and I think Onslaught is the skeleton for that. I think that plays in perfectly to just. Right, you even have waves, and you just have a counter that just goes up higher and higher, and someone's going to get to wave 250 or some egregiously large number because people play this game for 8 or 10 hours at a time. Like, I want to see what that looks like, and it's like basically every reward is like an exotic dumping out on you, but it's like, you're rewarded for being that good.
Yeah.
And put cosmetic rewards, right? Put an emblem or a shader or something that like only a small group of people have, because it's like you grinded your ass off and are that good that you got to wave 100 in Onslaught.
I agree, and I think they want to do it. They just haven't figured out the best way to do it.
Right.
They just...
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is I think they gave us another Onslaught mode too soon.
Yeah.
I think, in Revenant, when they gave us the new Onslaught mode, people were like, oh yeah, Onslaught, and then I think people were kind of bored of it, whereas if they waited longer and gave us a more fleshed out version later on, it would have been better.
Like if it came out now, it might be better, because like...
Or with Frontiers.
Yeah, or if they kind of did it as like another... Didn't they say they're going to do like another kind of Into the Light type dealy this season?
Yeah.
Right? So if it's like every year we got a couple new maps added... Because I agree with you. Like, I think when it was announced that like Onslaught was coming back, it's a cool... And then after like doing a few of them, you're like, oh, that's right. I just spent the last couple months before Final Shape came out playing this ad nauseum, and it's still a little too soon too
samey.
Yeah, and and that's always kind of a problem that Bungie's had too, where it's like that FOMO. Like, I still stand by this, where it's like, if it's going to be a deep cut, if Sparrow Racing League was not shoved down your throat for 3 weeks straight, I think people would play it more over like a longer span of time. But it's basically like you had to play it to get certain rewards, and you only had 3 weeks, and then it was gone forever. And then it's like, so you're basically every waking moment of your next 3 weeks.
SRL, give us Wrath of the Machine.
Right.
Whole community's happy.
Well, I'm just saying, like, stop doing these, like...
Monkey's Paw Effect, we get the SRL version of Wrath of the Machine.
But it's
you
like,
race Axis on a bike.
With Into the Light, it's like, oh, we have these shiny weapons, but you can only earn them for the next, like, 3 weeks or a month.
Yeah, so everyone blitz
you're
onslaught.
Forcing yourself to play that activity non-stop, and then you're burning yourself out on it. And so the next time it comes...
came back a few months later.
Yeah, and you're, like, still kind of, like, recovering from the trauma that was your life of playing Onslaught non-stop. And it's like, they need to just, like... They shouldn't have had the shinies be an exclusive thing. Like, would people have played Onslaught less? Maybe not, because it was still new content that was kind of placeholder before Final Shape came out. But ultimately, like, they do this to themselves, where it's like they said they're trying to move away from FOMO, but they still find different ways to like inject it, where it's like probably not healthy long term for like people wanting to play the activity. But then I say that, and it's like, you know, people max their rank out on whatever the new reputation is the first week of a season coming out. It's like, guys, you've got 4 months or 5 months to play this. Like, pace yourself. No, I got to get it all done in a week. It's like, all right, but then you're the one who's going on Reddit and complaining there's nothing to do. So it's like, I don't know what the solution is. I'll stop talking.
No,
he was cooking.
I don't think you need to have a solution to present a problem. I think that's totally valid, and I think we're going to get something. It's just not today. But anyways, to switch gears, let's talk about, because Rob, I know you've been dying to talk about Trials. What's new on that front? I have not touched it in months upon months. So I have no idea what the hell's going on. But I know you were mentioning it.
Yeah, the biggest fundamental change, and there's actually a whole like article on Crucible changes that they came out with like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But the biggest number one thing is you no longer need to go flawless to go to the lighthouse. That's like if you were to TLDR it. What that means, though, is they got rid of the traditional passages of like Passage of Confidence, Passage of Mercy, and there was the other passage to get, Passage of Wealth or whatever, right? Where...
Passage of Passage.
Of what?
I said Passage of Passage.
Yeah, Passage of Passages. And now there's 2 passages. One is Passage of Trials or whatever that basically just lets you play Trials of Osiris, and it tracks your wins. And it's almost like someone summed it, in my clan summed it up best. It's basically like Iron Banner at that point, where it's like a weekend event. You just play, you get rewards, you get decent rewards, you get good reputation. Ultimately, you're still moving up the trials track. You're able to get the engrams that you can then convert to learning or getting weapons. Super rewarding, fun, very non-committal in terms of like it tracks your wins, but you're also playing against other people that aren't being super sweaty either. So good on them, great. Then there's also Passage of Lighthouse, which is what most people are going to want to eventually graduate to, because that does track your win streak in addition to your wins. And when you get 7 wins, regardless of how many losses you have or what your highest win streak is, you can now go to the Lighthouse. And you will get a set amount of rewards, and it's actually detailed pretty heavily. There's a bunch of different, like, if you did this and you got this many win streaks, then you have your rewards are this, and this. And so you are incentivized and encouraged to go on the best win streak that you can. But ultimately, even if you get like 2 wins, there is still a slight chance, I think it's like 60%, that you will get an adept weapon when you open the chest at the Lighthouse. You can do it as many times as you want, but there is kind of once you've gotten the 2 win streak reward, the next time you go to the Lighthouse, your rewards will be less unless you get more win streaks on your next card. So you still want to reset it after you go to the Lighthouse, because you can go back to the Lighthouse and earn more rewards. But you basically have to do a little bit better each time. But the punchline is, if you really want to just know, like, okay, what does this matter, is you basically, if you get at least a 3 win streak on your Lighthouse card, you are guaranteed a 100% chance of getting at least one adept weapon when you open the chest if you do it solo. So getting adept trials rewards. And Map, I want to say that you called this because you were the one that said, like, oh, it's probably going to scale based on how many wins you get or whatever. And you were absolutely right. That's how they did it. Yeah. And I think after kind of reading it and playing it, I think it's one of the best things they could have done, because even if like
I think this is the best change that's come to trials, other than like all right, it's no longer how it was before, right. But I think this is the way it had to be. Right. Like, even as someone who likes the really competitive nature of trial, how it was at its peak, competitive trials, and at its height, I think this is the way it had to be. And as I said to you, Rob, earlier, what's good now is that where it's more accessible and it's way more rewarding, that you're going to get people who don't normally play PvP, want to play trials. Right. They're going to go into trials and think, I want to get better. I want to get on a win streak. So I'm going to go practice in quick play. Right. So you get more people. Like, okay, it's not going to increase the numbers that much, but it's going to add to the numbers of people playing PvP, which is always a good thing.
Right. So I would say it's overall healthy, especially. And this week, you find matches super quick because there's a ton of people in there playing. There's also you're also encouraged.
I normally in between each game, when I'm waiting to load in, I'll normally do a set of weights or whatever, press ups, whatnot, in between each game.
That's cool.
I did not have time to do that.
Yeah, it finds people quick.
Yeah.
And you're also encouraged to play in a fire team. I think the larger your team, if you do if for every win on your card, if you do it with a 3-man team, it is an escalatingly higher likelihood of getting an additional adept drop when you finally get to the lighthouse. And there's kind of other things along the way. So like yesterday, I did a 3-man team on all 7 wins, and we had a 7-win streak. And so when we got to the lighthouse, I got 4 adept drops in my chest, in addition to a bunch of other things. Like I got the shader, there's ciphers that you can get, which ultimately you can then turn into more adept weapons if you want at Osiris. At St. 14. So it is way, way, way more rewarding. All you need to do is watch like some streamer go to the lighthouse on a 7-win card or with 7-win streak card, and it just poops loot out you like it's nobody's business.
It gives you so much stuff.
And so it's great because it encourages I'm still going to go for my 7-win streak because that is still the most rewarding. But now that they have made it, you could play solo. As long as you get 3 wins in a row somewhere on your card, you're guaranteed at least 1 adept drop. And
like if they
a bunch
keep
of other
up
stuff.
the guns that they're giving out in trials, they get rid of obviously the cheating problem, which is an ongoing thing. Right. Genuinely, I don't really see an issue with trials currently.
Yeah. And it's
like the only problem that trials will always have is player numbers. If the player numbers go down, trials gets worse. But the way it stands now, if it continues to be this, around this player count and this rewarding, then you'll probably always have people playing it.
And it
especially around like a new drop of content.
And it helps that it's a new hand cannon. Well, it's not a new hand cannon. It's Exile, or no, not Exile's Curse.
Exiled Truth.
Exiled Truth. I knew there was Exile in there. Exalted.
So the rolls I got were so terrible.
But it's got a bunch of new like void keyword perks on it, like demoralized and some other things like that.
I think I got destabilizing rounds and just something terrible, and it was like it wasn't good for PvE or PvP. It was just like And then the other one was terrible as well. Zen Moment, Eye of the Storm, which is all right, cool stability, but like the range on it was
poopy,
bad. Yeah.
Well, and then you can get Mag Howl on it and things like that if that's kind of your jam. So ultimately, it's like it's a new gun kind of, and I think because part of it too is people didn't like it the first time it came out, even though I had a decent roll on it that I like and still have. But ultimately, it's kind of like you said. It's a new season, new rewards. It's never been easier to go to the lighthouse. All you have to do is just suffer through 7 wins, and you'll get rewards. And there's like they've increased the drops as well, like after the game is, so like you just passively get a bunch of weapons and engrams, and like I played so much Trials yesterday, I almost reset my reputation with Saint 14, and I've never done that like in one kind of session before. So like I've been enjoying it like a lot. I had a couple of resets that I'm not proud of. Reset my card, I should say, but yeah, they finally kind of like, yeah, maybe they should have done these like a while ago, but I'm glad that they've done it, and I think it'll at least for the short term keep the pool healthy. I think what needs to happen is, like, you know, there's a new set of armor that also came out, so that's exciting. And there's probably people who are so backlogged on a bunch of the other armor that they've never gotten that there's a lot of like loot to chase. So I think the changes are good. I hope that it stays around a little bit longer and keeps the pool healthy. But we'll have to see. But I think overall, some good changes.
So, lastly, do we want to touch on the dungeon?
Just very briefly.
I have not played it.
Very briefly. Just what are your initial thoughts? Very briefly. And then we'll talk about it at a later time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this will be our last topic, and this will kind of tease into our next episode. We will talk about the dungeon when Matt has played it, and in a separate episode when we have more time.
Sorry, guys.
A full episode to talk about Sundered Doctrine, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But first impressions, Sundered Doctrine, I think it's really good. I had a lot of fun playing it. Obviously, I have critiques of it, but I think it's up there. I think it's very fun, new endgame content. I think the aesthetic could be improved. I'm a little sick of pyramid stuff, for sure. But mechanically, I think it's fun. The story's really good. The weapons are insanely good. The new hand cannon is awesome. Firefly Volt Shot rolls on the scout rifle. I mean, that's cool as hell. So a lot of cool stuff there. I think the boss fight is ultimately still less tedious than Vespers, the puppeteer. So that's a plus.
That thing in the lower stacks?
Yeah, that thing in the lower stacks. Overall, I think it's pretty good. But Rob, what did you think?
So I like the dungeon overall. First encounter, not a huge fan of, and again, we'll talk all about this. And it could just also be like I'm still learning it. Second encounter is like not intuitive, and I've done it like 2 or 3 times, and every time I've done it, we've brute forced it, which is like probably not really how you want to design an encounter. But I think all of that is made up for in the final encounter, which to your point is not tedious at all. And in fact, it's kind of
rewards you for being good at it, I feel like.
Yes, it rewards you for being good, and ultimately, if you're in a stack of 3, you can get it done even faster because you can divide and conquer into the 3 rooms and kind of, you know, if you need to, and ultimately, I was reading this on Reddit and I didn't quite understand it until I got to the dungeon where it's like, it encourages you to know the lore. Because if you know what the truth and what the lie is, and I'm, you know, these aren't huge revelations in the lore, like, you know, Savathun is Zavala's brother or something. Like, it's not that level of lore or something. But the statements,
what?
Yeah, I know, right? But the statements are such that if you know them and are comfortable with them, you can also get the encounter done that much faster because you can read them and immediately go, okay, we need to do this, this, and this. And so it's like, I think I really like the third encounter, and I think it makes up for the other 2 a lot. And I fortunately, the other 2 encounters aren't too egregious. I think the first one runs a little long, but it's ultimately not hard, so it's fine. But I do think the third encounter is where it really shines. And when I saw that it was symbols again from Vow of the Disciple, I was ready to punch a window. But fortunately, it's not too bad. So
all right. Well, we can get into this.
I love Vow.
More.
I love Vow.
I like Vow too, and I have the Disciple Slayer title. I just don't. The symbols are not as egregious in Vow as they are in Last Wish, because the Last Wish symbols are kind of explicitly why I don't like running Last Wish, because the symbols are way too samey in Last Wish, where it's like, oh, it's a fish. Well, what kind of fish? Is it the one that's facing left or right? The one that's kelp in front of it? Or like it's too many syllables that you need to get out to describe it. Whereas this, you can say, kill, stop, guardian, light. Like, it's super easy. Like, it's just more, and that feels like an iteration of like, hey, we realize that the symbols are way too samey in Last Wish, and these all feel distinct. And I've done it so many times now that I feel more comfortable with the callouts. Whereas, like, I still call uwu snake, even though I know that's not what it's called, and I have no idea what it's actually called. And at this point, I'm too afraid to ask. So,
so we can dive into this more, but I will say the final encounter, I like it now that I understand how to do it.
Right.
And it's fun, but as far as like a blind experience, it makes zero sense, and I feel like it sucks as far as a blind experience. Because how in the actual hell were you ever supposed to figure that out?
Yeah.
I feel like there are like no indicators for that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it takes a mechanic from the first encounter and says, no, do it opposite this time.
Yeah, I know. And that's
like, what?
And that's always been my biggest complaint about the duality dungeon, where up to the final boss, every time you shoot a totem, it swaps dimensions. But for some reason on the Keitel boss, you shoot it to stun her and stay in that dimension. And that is bad design.
I agree. And well, that's the problem with... Well, that surprises me that you like this boss, because it's like...
Well, I don't disagree with you on... I know we're being super like vague about what the issue is. I don't disagree with you, because I agree I don't want to like spoil it for Mav. I agree that it's a problem and it's not intuitive. And when I'll fess up to this, when we got to that part of the boss encounter, because we tried it and we kind of got stuck, and we looked it up and it was like, oh, you do the opposite. And it was like, okay, that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
I think what I was more bothered by and annoyed by, and this is still just kind of a problem, is the doors that you have to shoot to open.
That door fucking sucks. Sorry, forgive my French, but oh my god.
It's the first time we did it, and we got stuck in the one room, and it was like your ghost kind of does that little like alert thing, and you go up to it, and it's like, you know what they should have done? This is where it's like the game should teach you to do this. Is like the first time you go up to the door, your ghost should be like, there's definitely something on the other side, but this door's not shooting or opening. I don't know, just try shooting it or something. Like have there be some kind of silly like in-game explanation of just like, well, I don't know, just try shooting it. That always seems to work. And then you do, and that causes the door to, kind of open up. And I don't like that it feels like you have to almost use like an auto rifle or something with fast fire rate to open those doors. God. And it's like, if I want to use a scout rifle, I'm like hindered.
Oh, it's like what was that encounter in Leviathan, where it was basically more beneficial for you to use like an auto or a pulse than a single fire.
Oh yeah,
the running one where you had to shoot the two things. It was just better if you shot it with an auto, because
it's like that.
Yeah,
you didn't have to sit there reloading all the time.
There's doors that open up, and it's kind of a long hallway that opens. And there's a few different places you have to do it, and you have to keep fire on it to keep it open, because otherwise, if you stop, it slowly closes, and you can die like mid-traversal. And so, it's
just like so inconsistent. It feels like.
And exactly. So it's like if one of your buddies is like, it's almost kind of like in Vow of the Disciple, where someone goes in and does something in a room, and then you have to open the door for them to come out when they've grabbed the symbols. It's kind of like that. Very, very, very basic explanation. But to open the doors, it's really, really irritating, because you have to keep sustained fire on it, and if you don't, then they'll get squished and die. And it's like, so I guess it's kind of funny you could pull a prank on your friends, but like it's not intuitive on how to open the door, because it's not like anything we've ever done before, which like it's fine to have new kind of puzzly things, like because the dungeon itself has a lot of like the traversal section, rather than having these long jumping puzzles, it's more like you're in a room with a puzzle that you have to solve to advance. And I will say, once you know the solution, you can get it done way, way quicker than like, let's say, like Ghost of the Deep, where that whole jumping puzzle part takes the same amount of time if it's your first time versus your 70th time, because there's no shortcuts, there's no way to like really speed through it. Whereas this is like, the more you kind of memorize what the solutions for some of those middle puzzles are that are just sort of to like traverse the area, you can get done so much quicker. So I don't mind them. Like for now, we're still kind of learning them, and like there's the one where you have to get the two lights on opposite sides. I still kind of struggle with that a little bit, but that's one of those where I definitely at a certain point I'm just going to know what to do, and it'll go a lot quicker. So
it's just I like that final boss encounter. Like now, like I think it rewards you very well. It flows very well. It's generally it's pretty fun. There's a lot of cool stuff about that fight. It's just a blind experience. I remember when we were doing this, and I don't know, it was late, and Ryan needed to go do something, and he's like, all right, guys, I'm going to be honest, I did look it up. I just looked it up right now, and we're like, we're like, okay, and he's like, I will tell you, you probably would have never figured this out. He's like, I'll give you like some hints, and he was giving us hints, and I'm like, what? Like, how does that do anything? He's like, and then he explained it, and I'm like, how was I supposed to figure that out? Like at the wheel, there's like no indicator that it's supposed to be that way. Like
divided. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, okay. Let's save it for the rest of the. Now we're getting into the weeds. No, but you're absolutely right. Like, yeah, play the dungeon map, and we'll talk about it next time, because it's a cool dungeon. I will say they have done a good job of like every dungeon feels different from every other dungeon, like thematically, and
yes.
Like this doesn't feel like recycled content. Like even though we're going back to the pyramid ship in the throne world.
Oh yeah, no, I like the pyramid environments. I'm not bored of them. I know some people are, but I still enjoy it.
They still at least like update the pyramid environment a little bit in the sense that it's it's I don't know. It's very like Indiana Jones, where it's like this like
tomb. Yeah,
there's like vines and stuff everywhere. And
I will say now after playing like the Final Shape, the Salvation's Edge raid, playing Lightfall, and playing Witch Queen, each one of those pyramid ships does feel different enough that it doesn't feel like you're going through the same pyramid ship.
Yeah, that's true. You know what does feel too samey though?
What?
Salvation's Edge.
Yeah, that's
just like visually, aesthetically.
We should talk about that raid sometime. But it's really unfortunate that the quote unquote like witness showdown that raid ultimately sucks. And I will stand by that. I probably hate that raid the most of the current raids that we have.
Damn, even more than Root of Nightmares.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If from a like, hey, let's do a pickup raid real quick. I would do Root of Nightmares 7 times before I did Salvation's Edge again, I think.
Brutal.
Okay, maybe I'm being hyperbolic, but I would take Root of Nightmares every time over Salvation's Edge.
Valid. All right, I think that about closes out the episode. We'll talk about Sundered Doctrine next time. I think we'll do a whole deep dive into it. There's a lot to talk about.
Yep.
But anyways, thank you guys for hopping on and chatting. I really appreciate you, as always. Thank you, folks, for listening. Go check us out at Twitch. We stream, I don't know, semi-infrequently. We stream sometimes. And go follow us on, I don't know, but we don't even use Twitter anymore, do we? Instagram or something.
Do you have Instagram?
Subscribe. I do have an Instagram. I don't really update it that often, but we do have that Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're pretty frequent on there as well, if you're not already watching on YouTube. Anyways, so thank you guys. We will see you guys next time. Peace.
Bye.
Put this voice recording away and go on with your life, because you and I both know you'd have me yapping in your ear for the rest of your days.
Want to further the discussion? Get in touch with us at any of our Twitter handles, all of which can be found at our podcast description.